Breaking news Sahel. In a major announcement that has drawn the attention of governments, humanitarian agencies, security analysts, and development partners across Africa and beyond, the United Nations has confirmed the disbursement of 850 billion CFA francs in support of Burkina Faso, a country grappling with one of the most complex security and humanitarian crises in the Sahel region. The funding, according to UN officials, is intended to provide a comprehensive response to the intertwined challenges of armed violence, population displacement, food insecurity, weakened public services, and stalled development efforts that have placed immense strain on both the state and its citizens. This announcement comes at a time when Burkina Faso continues to face persistent attacks by armed groups, growing humanitarian needs, and an urgent demand for stability amid political and social uncertainty. Over the past several years, Burkina Faso has witnessed a dramatic deterioration in its security environment, particularly in its northern and eastern regions, where armed groups have expanded their operations, targeting civilians, security forces, and critical infrastructure. Entire communities have been uprooted as violence has forced families to flee their homes, often with little more than what they could carry. According to humanitarian organizations operating in the country, millions of people now depend on emergency assistance for food, shelter, healthcare, and education. The UN funding package is therefore being presented as a lifeline, designed not only to respond to immediate humanitarian emergencies but also to address the deeper structural vulnerabilities that have allowed instability to take root. UN representatives have emphasized that the funding will be allocated across multiple sectors, reflecting the complexity of the crisis facing Burkina Faso. A significant portion is expected to support humanitarian relief operations, including food aid, nutrition programs, access to clean water, and emergency healthcare services for internally displaced persons and host communities. At the same time, resources are earmarked for strengthening basic public services, rebuilding damaged infrastructure, and supporting local development initiatives aimed at restoring livelihoods and reducing dependency on aid. This dual focus on emergency response and longer-term recovery signals an acknowledgement by the international community that humanitarian assistance alone cannot resolve the challenges confronting the country. Security remains a central concern shaping the deployment of the funds. While the United Nations does not directly finance military operations, officials have indicated that part of the support will go toward initiatives that enhance civilian protection, improve coordination among local authorities, and strengthen institutions responsible for maintaining law and order. This includes support for community-based conflict prevention mechanisms, early warning systems, and programs designed to reduce tensions between displaced populations and host communities. By addressing the social and economic drivers of conflict, the UN hopes to contribute indirectly to improved security conditions and to create space for political dialogue and reconciliation. The announcement has been met with cautious optimism among Burkinabe citizens, many of whom have endured years of insecurity, economic hardship, and uncertainty about the future. For families displaced by violence, the promise of increased humanitarian aid offers hope for improved living conditions and access to essential services. Farmers affected by insecurity and climate-related shocks see potential in development programs that could help restore agricultural production and stabilize food supplies. Youth groups and civil society organizations have also expressed interest in seeing part of the funding directed toward education, vocational training, and employment opportunities, which are widely viewed as critical to preventing further radicalization and social fragmentation. At the same time, questions remain about implementation, transparency, and impact. Previous international funding efforts in the Sahel have sometimes struggled to translate large financial commitments into tangible improvements on the ground, due to insecurity, limited access to affected areas, bureaucratic delays, and weak institutional capacity. Observers note that for the 850 billion CFA francs to make a meaningful difference, coordination between the UN, national authorities, local governments, and non-governmental organizations will be essential. Ensuring that aid reaches the most vulnerable populations, while avoiding duplication and waste, will require robust monitoring mechanisms and sustained political will. The political context in Burkina Faso adds another layer of complexity to the situation. The country has experienced significant political transitions in recent years, with shifts in leadership driven in part by public frustration over insecurity and governance challenges. These changes have reshaped relations with international partners and influenced the government's approach to security and development policy. The UN funding announcement may therefore be interpreted not only as a humanitarian gesture but also as a signal of continued international engagement with Burkina Faso during a period of transition. Diplomats and analysts suggest that the success of the funding effort could influence future cooperation and investment, both from multilateral institutions and bilateral partners. Regionally, the UN's decision to mobilize such a substantial amount of funding for Burkina Faso underscores growing concern about the stability of the Sahel as a whole. Violence and displacement in one country often have spillover effects, affecting neighboring states through refugee flows, cross-border insecurity, and economic disruption. By supporting Burkina Faso, the UN aims to contribute to broader regional stability, recognizing that the challenges facing the country are not isolated but interconnected with wider dynamics in West Africa. This perspective aligns with calls from regional organizations and African leaders for more coordinated and sustained international support for Sahelian countries. From a development standpoint, the funding package reflects an effort to balance short-term humanitarian needs with longer-term investments in resilience. Development experts have long argued that cycles of crisis in the Sahel are fueled by a combination of poverty, weak governance, environmental stress, and limited economic opportunities. Addressing these root causes requires sustained investment in education, healthcare, infrastructure, and inclusive economic growth. UN officials have indicated that part of the funding will support programs aimed at strengthening local governance, empowering women and youth, and promoting social cohesion, all of which are considered essential for durable peace and development. International reactions to the announcement have been largely positive, with several donor countries and humanitarian organizations welcoming the scale of the commitment while urging swift and effective implementation. Some analysts, however, caution that financial support alone cannot resolve deep-seated political and security challenges. They argue that progress will depend on parallel efforts to promote dialogue, respect for human rights, and accountable governance. In this view, the UN funding should be seen as one component of a broader strategy that includes political engagement, regional cooperation, and support for locally driven solutions. As the funds begin to be dispersed and programs rolled out, attention will turn to measuring their impact on the lives of ordinary Burkinabe citizens. Will displaced families gain reliable access to food, shelter, and education? Will communities affected by violence see improvements in security and social cohesion? Will development projects create jobs and restore confidence in the future? These questions will shape perceptions of the UN's role in Burkina Faso and influence debates about the effectiveness of international assistance in fragile contexts. For Burkina Faso, the announcement represents both an opportunity and a test. The scale of the funding offers a chance to alleviate immediate suffering and lay the groundwork for recovery, but it also raises expectations among a population weary of promises that have too often failed to deliver lasting change. How the funds are managed, who benefits from them, and whether they contribute to real improvements in security, stability, and development will determine whether this moment is remembered as a turning point or another missed opportunity in the country's ongoing struggle for peace and prosperity. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.